Well, what with the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and his deputy all away on holiday last week, is anything going on behind the doors of government? Well, it turns out, yes, rather a lot is. Earlier, I spoke to the Senior Cabinet Office Minister, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, to give him himself his full title, Kit Malthouse, who's been overseeing things while the battle for number 10 continues with those leadership contenders. And I started by asking him, with multiple crises coming up on the horizon, what does he think winter will look like?
Well, obviously, as everybody knows, right, the winter is always a challenge, particularly for the health service. But the particular challenge this winter is that we've got a number of problems coming together at the same time. So obviously, people are feeling the challenge of energy and fuel costs in their day-to-day lives, and making sure that we get through the winter intact from a fuel supply and an energy supply point of view is the first problem. The second is obviously dealing with an NHS which is still recovering from COVID, but is going into a winter there where it may again be challenged by rising COVID infection rates, but also the usual seasonal flu that may come through, as well at the same time as having an elective treatment backlog to catch up on. And then obviously we've got the wider global inflationary problem, which is affecting the cost of living for so many people across the country, which we have to look at too. So it's not so much any one of these problems, it's all three coming together at the same time.
Well, you very affectionately refer to it as a particular challenge, these three coming together at once. It does rather sound like a bit more than that. I mean, how bad could things really get if you all can't coordinate things, or if you find yourself swept away by international events?
Well, look, my job is to make sure that all the departments are preparing themselves for what government calls the reasonable worst-case scenario.
What does the reasonable worst-case scenario look like? Are you, for example, able to guarantee the lights will stay on at all times because we're going to get the energy supply? And are you able to guarantee there won't be public disorder on the streets?
Well, yes, Tom. I mean, part of our job is to make sure that we have security of supply. And as you know, we are not as exposed, for example, to Russian gas as some of our European partners are. And so we're feeling pretty secure there. Now, there are always risks to these things, and we have to take care that we are resilient in our plans. And part of our job over the summer is to make sure that we have those supply lines secured. And that work is ongoing, and from my point of view, it looks pretty good. But at the same time, we have to bear in mind, as I say, that we are part of a wider, shall we say, brother and sisterhood of nations that need to work together, perhaps, to get through what will be a challenging winter for some more than others. And so we'll be needing to talk to our allies and partners around the world at what that looks like. Similarly, you know, for example, access to food is an issue not for us, but for other parts of the world. So the grain deal that's been done between Russia and Ukraine to get that grain out of the Black Sea and into the rest of the world is a critical one for world food security that will have a sort of ripple impact on us in terms of food prices. So there's a complicated game there, if you like, of 3D chess that we have to play. And what we're trying to do over the summer is make sure that we put it all together in a way that protects the UK and secures us for the next few months, in a way that will impact very little, we hope, on people's lives.
Now, add to all that, of course, is the effect of potentially mass strikes across the public sector. Teachers, nurses in particular. Now, if they walk out, that could be pretty catastrophic for the workforce. How are you preparing for those?
Well, obviously, as I say, the job of the Cabinet Office is to make sure that the department concerned, so with nurses, that would be the Department of Health and Social Care, that they have plans in place to deal with that problem. Now, I don't think nurses are going to walk off the job and leave patients, you know, unattended to in hospital. But if they do, and I hope they don't decide to go for strike action, but if they do, there have to be contingency plans in place to deal with that. And my job is to make sure that...
Are you making them, and what are they?
So we are making plans, obviously, for all sorts of contingencies across all sorts of public services, and particularly in critical areas like health. So, for example, one of the plans that we'll be looking at when I talk about coincidence of events, right, we need to make sure that all those hospitals that need access to power have their standby generators properly serviced. They've got the diesel tanks full with diesel that might be required. You know, that the work they need to do to make sure that they're resilient from a power and an energy point of view has been done before we get, say, to November when the winter starts. And they need to do similar planning around things like proposed strike action. Look, I hope that the strikes that people are talking about or considering for the autumn don't happen. that there are sensible conversations about what can be afforded in terms of pay and conditions against the obligation we all have to try and help the country get through this very difficult winter in good shape. Let's hope those discussions go well.
OK, do you think the two leadership candidates have talked about the upcoming crises enough in this contest? They sound pretty dire, and they're very difficult choices, as Prime Minister, they're going to have to make.
Well, I certainly know that they've contemplated them because we've talked about them in Cabinet before this particular leadership competition. And I know that both Liz and Rishi will be well across.
But they're not talking about
Sorry?
them. The conversation you and I are having now has not come up.
Well, in the hustings, they answer the questions that are put to them. And, you know, there's a long way to go. We've still got a month to go. I'm sure these issues will start to come into focus in the weeks to come. But look, both of them have talked about what more they may need to do in the autumn, for example, to help with the cost of living. And, you know, obviously they've been part of the discussion, as I say, in Cabinet over the last few months.
Finally, Mr Malthouse, you haven't yet come out to back either candidate, Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. Why not?
Well, to be honest with you, Tom, I'd be happy to work with both. They're both outstanding politicians and parliamentarians. I've been listening carefully to what they've been saying, obviously, and I'll be casting my vote at some point in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And which one are you voting for?
I'm keeping my counsel for the moment, Tom. When I've made up my mind, I'll be putting a cross in the ballot paper, but no more than that.
You're about to say you'll come back and tell me, but then decided against it.